Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Regimental Sergeant Major Army Warrant Officer Grant McFarlane. This evening's Last Post ceremony marks one of the final duties in uniform for Warrant Officer McFarlane after more than 40 years of service in the Australian Defence Force. Warrant Officer McFarlane grew up in country Victoria. He enlisted in the Australian Regular Army on the 26th of February 1980 and was allocated to the Royal Australian Regiment and was posted to the 3rd Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment. Warrant Officer McFarlane completed his Regimental Sergeant Major's course in 2001 and was appointed as a Regimental Sergeant Major of the 10th 27th Battalion, Royal South Australian Regiment in 2003. His other Regimental Sergeant Major appointments have been 3rd Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment, 3rd Brigade, Combined Team Uruzgan, the 2nd Division and Career Management Army. His other Warrant Officer Class 1 appointments have been Wing Sergeant Major at the School of Infantry and Career Manager for Infantry Sergeants. Warrant Officer McFarlane has also served in Malaysia, East Timor with Interfet, 1999 to 2000, and again in 2006, Operation Astute, followed by Combined Teamed Uruzgan, Afghanistan, October 2011 to February 2012. He was appointed a member of the Order of Australia in the Queen's Birthdays Honours List in 2022. Warrant Officer McFarlane was appointed as the 11th Regimental Sergeant Major Army in July 2018. Sir, we thank you for your service and wish you the best in your future endeavours. This evening's Last Post ceremony, we are honoured to acknowledge Lieutenant General Rick Bird, Chief of Army. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We also acknowledge the members of the RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching this ceremony broadcast across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Thank you. If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Morton Edward Kem. Morton Edward Kem was born in Wagga Wagga to James and Sarah Kem in 1892. Morton's parents run a grocery store. After leaving school, he became a grocer. In September 1915, Kem volunteered for service in the Australian Imperial Force. He undertook his initial training in Australia before embarking from Sydney on the transport ship Aenas in December. On arrival in Egypt, he continued his training in the Australian camp. There he joined his unit, the 2nd Australian Infantry Battalion. At the end of March 1916, the 2nd Battalion sailed from France to join the British forces on the Western Front. Until the end of the year, the unit spent time training behind the lines, as well as in the front line trenches. During July, the 2nd Battalion was involved in the first assault on the first line of German trenches at Pozieres. During this month, the battalion diary records the constant artillery bombardment of Australian positions, as well as the activity of British and German aeroplanes in the air above the battlefield. By the end of 1916, conditions in the trenches were worsening, as well as the ever-present danger of sniper and artillery attacks. Continuous wet weather in October and November caused trenches and dugouts to collapse. Conditions such as these were a factor in outbreak of disease. In December, Kem was evacuated to hospital behind the lines with a skin infection. He recuperated throughout the winter and had recovered by the middle of February. In early March 1917, Kem returned to his unit, which had recently returned to the front line about 2 miles southwest of Morton. On the 4th of March, just 2 days after returning, he was killed in action. His service record does not note the circumstances of his death, but soldiers in the frontline trenches were under constant threat of artillery bombardment, sniper fire and strafing by enemy aircraft. Morton Kem was 24 years old. In Australia, Kem was survived by his 2 sisters, Hilda and Beatrice. He was buried in a small cemetery close to where he fell, but after the war, his and surrounding grave sites were consolidated at Wallencourt British Cemetery in northern France. His sister Hilda chose the inscription for his headstone. He rose responsive to his country's call. He gave his life, his best, his all. All 3 Kem men served in the First World War. Morton's older half-brother, Gunner Frank Kem, served in the 1st Divisional Ammunition Column and returned to Australia in July 1999. His brother, Sergeant Percy Kem, also served with the artillery and returned to Australia after prolonged illness in July 1917. Through his father, Kem had Chinese ancestry. He and his brothers were 3 of more than 200 Chinese Australians to enlist in the AIF during the First World War. Private Morton Edward Kem is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian Memorial. We now remember Private Morton Edward Kem, who gave his life for us, our freedoms, and the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. In the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We'll remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub of Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorials Development Project. And we wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.